Erta Ale. A curved chain of active volcanoes rises in the Danakil Depression, a landscape of terror, hardship and death. The British explorer Ludovico M. Nesbitt wrote in 1934, "Perhaps our grandchildren will learn how to reach the stars, and then they will smile with amusement at our efforts, of those who have traversed and trodden places of the earth with difficulty." Like other passionate travelers of his generation, Nesbitt was convinced that the last unexplored regions of the earth should be conquered only on the basis of the highest achievements of mankind. Craters at night. Rivers and springs of molten rock glow reddish in the dark, on the hot lava site of Erta Ale, one of the 5 smoking mountains. Cars and airplanes, he believes, are too close to be truly part of the environment. Nesbitt was happy to be able to call on the old and slow methods of exploration, by which the taste and smells of some primitive, isolated territories can be fully felt, though with great and painful efforts, by the traveler himself. These were the methods used by his expedition in 1928, when he and the 2 Italians accompanying him were the first Europeans to see the group of volcanoes called Erta Ale. The purpose of the trip was to cross the approximately 640 kilometers that cross from north to south the Danakil Depression, part of the Great Rift that crosses East Africa. The outlook was not encouraging. The land was mostly an alkaline desert, located far below sea level, where the heat burned like an oven. Water was almost non-existent, and the tribes in the area, outside, were famous for being cruel and bloody. The 6 European expeditions that had ventured into the region in the previous decades had perished, probably butchered. From the starting point in the Ossa Oasis, on the Awash River, Nesbitt plunged deep into the desert. Day after day the sun became hotter and hotter, and the 3 people decided to continue their journey only at night and at dawn. At sunrise, the sky and the desert became one, without a horizon, without distinct shapes and without distances. The sun's rays burned like an oven, but if the desert was hot, it could not be compared to the ravines of the Danakil Depression. There the ground itself seemed to be on fire, burning their feet through the soles of their boots. Water was becoming more and more scarce, and even the camels had started to die. In the heat of the sun, the temperature rises to 75 degrees Celsius, and under the canvas of the tent it barely drops by a few degrees. People and animals hid behind the rocks like insects, to avoid the heat. No matter how harsh the conditions were, on the horizon, you could always see the tall silhouettes, all wrapped in white, of the Afar warriors, as implacable as the desert itself. For them, the expedition, and especially the weapons, were a particularly precious booty. One evening, when the trick was dissipating, Nesbitt and his companions suddenly saw an impressive sight. In front of them, on an arc of a circle 80 kilometers long, 5 volcanoes lined up, their cones rising steeply on the flat expanse of the desert. Caldera spoke their names in a whisper: Erta Ale, Smoking Mountains. The nearest was Umuna, with a flat cloud of smoke on its summit. Then the Erta Ale urn itself, of almost perfect symmetry, with a misty plume rising to the sky. A blanket of smoke stretched above everyone, which, when darkness fell, was illuminated from below by a glowing reddish glow. The next morning the explorers set off further, but far from being flat, as it seemed from a distance, the land around the volcanoes was a rough mass of lava, like a dark petrified sea with sharp ridges like sharp blades. The cracks were full of slag that sagged like glass under the soles, tearing both the boots and the legs. Resigned and healing their wounds, the 3 set off to the west, passing by the peaks of Great Ale, and climbed a rise. In front of them lay a dazzling plain of salt. With the eternal fires of the volcanoes behind and the arid field in front, it seemed to the explorers that they were in a land of despair, cruel and frightening. Nesbitt called it a landscape of terror. But as the water was running out, they had no choice but to go forward, hoping that the guide's promise to find a well would not prove to be in vain. At the end of their powers, they finally saw a mouth of water, but between them and it stood a large group of locals. Fortunately, they were not warriors, but salt miners, who welcomed them and helped them reach the water. A few days later, the expedition started on the last stage of the route, towards the Cloud and the Red Sea. The whole journey, in one of the most inhospitable regions of the world, lasted 3.5 months. A pinch of salt. The Danakil Depression, where the Erta Ale volcanic cones rise, is one of the most unforgiving areas on Earth. During most of the year it is a pargelita plain, covered with salt, situated below sea level. In fact, initially it was part of the Red Sea, until the rise of the Danakil Plateau, to the north, separated it from the sea. The water left here evaporated, leaving behind a 3-kilometer thick layer of salt on the former seabed. The rare rains wash the salt from the higher areas and bring it to the lowest point, Lake Karam. This stretch of slightly deep water, rich in minerals, is 120 meters below sea level. For a short time, every year, it swells, reaching 72 kilometers wide, and hot springs erupt around it, as the water infiltrated into the soil meets the molten rock from the bowels of the earth.